In Guanajuato, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG, unleashed chaos, torching vehicles and stores to disrupt a military and DEA operation aimed at their leaders Double R and El Apa. This plan of sudden eruption of violence was a success, as the leaders escaped unharmed, leaving Mexican and American authorities grappling with the smoldering aftermath and a clear message of who runs the show. Time and again, CJNG has fearlessly stared down authorities, both domestic and international, showcasing a fearless approach to violence as a display of power. Their latest actions give a direct challenge to American law enforcement. Keep out of our way. So let's dive deep to discover everything you need to know about it. CJNG's message to the U.S. Over the past decade, CJNG has rapidly evolved from a relatively unknown entity into a major powerhouse within Mexico's drug trafficking landscape. There is one particular reason for their quick rise: violence and more violence. CJNG doesn't just use violence as a tool, it's their calling card, a deliberate strategy that's both shockingly overt and ruthlessly efficient. Their approach to expansion is aggressive and unyielding, involving tactics that are as strategic as they are brutal, affecting everyone from local residents to major corporations. In addition to their tactical brutality, CJNG is known for their chilling public executions and the brazen display of sophisticated weaponry. In a scene reminiscent of a war film, CJNG recently released a video that sent shockwaves around the world. The footage showcased rows of masked soldiers wearing combat gear, shooting in the air with their belt-fed machine guns or .50 caliber sniper rifles, and standing defiantly beside armored vehicles outfitted with heavy weaponry. This is by no means a state military parade, but a brazen display of power by one of Mexico's most feared drug cartels. The timing of this video is impeccable, coinciding with the Mexican president Andrés Manuel López Obrador's visit to the cartel's stronghold. It is clear the cartel is sending a stark message of challenge and defiance against governmental authority. Dozens of masked men in bulletproof vests carrying assault rifles were also heard declaring themselves as People of Mencho, the nickname for the leader, which I'm going to discuss shortly. With this video, one thing can be said with certainty: these aren't just ordinary criminals, they operate like a military unit, complete with tactical teams driving homemade armored vehicles known as narco tanks. These fortified vehicles represent the cartel's shift towards a military-style operation. Equipped to wage wars for territorial control, they navigate the rugged terrains of Mexico, ready to confront rival gangs or repel government forces. Don't believe me? Even Mike Vigil, a former chief of international operations for the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, echoed the same sentiment. They are sending a clear message that they basically rule Mexico, not López Obrador. Falco Ernst, a senior analyst on Mexico for the International Crisis Group, wrote on Twitter, "This video, taken yesterday in the Jalisco Sierra, as I'm told, is more than clear in its message toward the FedGov. You come after us and we will strike back." But how did such powerful weapons fall into the hands of CJNG? You'll be shocked to know that much of CJNG's arsenal of high-powered .50 caliber rifles can be legally purchased in most of the U.S. These deadly weapons frequently end up in the hands of cartel gunmen. The pathways for these illicit arms are varied, yet three main sources have been identified. First, there's the use of straw buyers in the U.S. who legally purchase 50 cal Barrett semi-automatic sporting rifles and other semi-automatics like AR-15S and AK-47S, only to smuggle them into Mexico. Once there, these civilian model rifles are often modified to offer burst and full auto firing capabilities. Second, depleted Central American military armories and international arms shipments contribute to the mix, with past major contributions from countries like China. This includes heavy-duty military-grade hardware like RPGs, anti-tank weapons, and various classes of machine guns, true warfighting equipment. The third and perhaps most troubling source is from within Mexico itself, involving corrupt political and military officials. This includes weapons smuggled from Army and National Guard bases, as well as seized cartel weapons that mysteriously re-enter circulation instead of being destroyed. These sources combine to arm the CJNG with a level of firepower that is disturbingly sophisticated and formidable. Now, you may be wondering, how did a Mexican cartel rise to challenge both Mexican and American authorities with such boldness? Well, the story of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel starts in the early 2000s, working under the infamous drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Initially part of El Chapo's Sinaloa cartel, the future leaders of CJNG honed their skills before rebelling against their former masters, seizing vast territories and corrupting police officers officers to establish their control. The rise of CJN into a dominant force started soon after the death of Ignacio Coronel, a key Sinaloa figure known as Nacho, who was killed by Mexican security forces in July 2010. Before his death, Coronel collaborated with Oscar Orlando Nava Valencia, also known as El Lobo, who led the Milenio Cartel. This group was integral to the Sinaloa cartel's operations as it controlled drug movement and finances across Jalisco, Colima, and later into Michoacan and Mexico City. The death of Coronel led to a power vacuum, and the Milenio Cartel split into two factions, the Resistencia and the Torcidos, Twisted Ones, the latter named so because of accusations of betraying El Lobo to the authorities. Out of this chaos, one faction emerged stronger and evolved into what is now known as CJN, dominating drug trafficking operations in Jalisco. CJN's leader, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, also known as El Mencho, is a former police officer. Under his leadership, the cartel's activities have been marked by unprecedented violence and aggression. El Mencho is the DEA's most wanted fugitive. They offer their largest reward ever of $10 million for information, leading to his arrest. Under El Mencho, CJN has become notorious for its violence. This includes a significant rise in murders, kidnappings, and finding hidden graves. One of their most brutal acts was in April 2015, when they ambushed and killed 15 police officers in Jalisco, one of the worst attacks on law enforcement in Mexico's recent history. They didn't stop there. In May 2015, they shot down a military helicopter and spread terror across Jalisco. The cartel has also targeted government officials, including an attempt to kill the Public Security Secretary of Mexico City in June 2020. Furthermore, CJN has repeatedly targeted public officials, including a failed assassination attempt on Luis Carlos Najera, Jalisco's former security secretary, in May 2018, and an assassination attack on Omar Garcia Harfuch, Mexico City's public security secretary, in June 2020. That same year, a judge in Colima who had adjudicated cases against CJN cartel members was murdered, along with his wife. Most shockingly, CJN is believed to be behind the assassination of former Jalisco Governor Aristoteles Sandoval in December 2020. The CJNG has employed a range of chilling methods to establish and display their dominance, not only among rival cartels, but also in their confrontations with authorities. Their tactics are marked by extreme violence, intended to instill fear and assert control. One particularly gruesome instance occurred in August 2023, when Mexican authorities discovered dozens of bodies, dismembered and preserved in freezers across several houses in Veracruz. This grisly find was linked to the CJN, with several arrests made of individuals believed to be associated with the cartel. In the same month, a video that surfaced on social media depicted a deeply disturbing scene where a young man was forced to kill his 4 friends in Jalisco. The video showed the man performing brutal acts of violence against his friends, a testament to the ruthless psychological tactics employed by the CJNG to terrorize communities and assert their power. Furthermore, the frequent sight of bodies hanging from bridges is another brutal strategy used by CJN, serving as a stark, visible reminder of the cartel's lethal reach and the severe consequences of crossing them. These acts are not just displays of violence, but are calculated to showcase their power and instill a sense of helplessness among the local populations and authorities alike. Since its inception, CJN has quickly become a dominant force in Mexico due to its strategic and often brutal operations. The cartel has expanded its influence across Mexico, excluding some strongholds like the Sinaloa region and the Golden Triangle. It's particularly dominant in Jalisco, Nayarit, Colima, and has significant control over strategic ports and regions involved in drug trafficking. CJN's control also extends into regions like Veracruz and key cities such as Tijuana and Ciudad Juarez, which are critical for their drug trafficking operations. The cartel's influence isn't just marked by its territorial control, but also by its capacity to instill fear and assert dominance through extreme violence and public displays of power. This approach has allowed them to challenge other major cartels and even the Mexican state itself. Despite this, the level of control varies, with fierce competition in several regions. In places like the Riviera Maya and the state of Guerrero, CJN faces continuous challenges from other criminal groups, fighting for control over lucrative criminal markets. Consequently, it has led to bloodshed, with common casualties including innocent civilians. Their presence in almost every state in Mexico shows their operational capacity and the complex network of activities ranging from drug trafficking to extortion and money laundering. That's why we've seen CJN's relentless pursuit of power extend into gold mine international markets. Zhejiang's international reach and operations. While the Zhejiang has established a formidable stronghold within Mexico, its reach extends well beyond the nation's borders, all thanks to its sophisticated and expansive international network. The cartel's network stretches across continents, connecting with major drug hubs and distributors worldwide. In South America, Zhejiang has forged strategic alliances in key drug-producing countries such as Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia, which are crucial for sourcing cocaine. You might be wondering how the Zhejiang cartel is able to expand so quickly. Well, the Zhejiang cartel adopts a franchise-like model in its international operations, allowing each unit to function as an independent entity tailored to the specifics of their local market. These groups specialize at different points in the criminal chain under the overarching brand of Zhejiang, enforced by the leadership of El Mencho. They adhere to strict business practices and organizational structures set by the cartel's central command. While decision-making remains centralized, the financial burden of operations is shouldered by these franchises. In exchange, the cartel gets a percentage of the profits. This ultimately helps facilitate rapid expansion across various regions. The cartel has made inroads into Australia, China, and various countries in Southeast Asia, tapping into new markets and expanding its logistical networks for both drug trafficking and money laundering. One of the cartel's most critical international relationships is with the Huistas in Guatemala. This partnership is instrumental for Zhejiang, facilitating a segment of the cocaine and synthetic drug trafficking routes into Mexico and onward to the United States. The extent of Zhejiang's expansion within the USA is staggering. In 2020, the DEA released its National Drug Threat Assessment, which included a detailed map illustrating the regions across the United States where Mexican cartels had established significant influence. According to this assessment, local gangs collaborate with the cartels to distribute methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl products. At that time, Zhejiang was identified as the second most powerful cartel in the USA, trailing only the Sinaloa cartel, which had secured more control due to its international dominance and deep infiltration into the higher ranks of the Mexican government. However, the latest annual report from the DEA indicates a shift in this dynamic. The report highlights that both the Sinaloa cartel and Zhejiang have effectively eliminated their competition, establishing a presence in all 50 states. This alarming expansion is particularly noted in the context of the ongoing synthetic drug crisis in the U.S., which the DEA describes as the most dangerous and deadly drug crisis the United States has ever faced. The DEA's report places significant blame for the opioid crisis in the United States on these two cartels, citing their extensive involvement in fentanyl trafficking. The profits from this illegal trade are estimated to be in the billions of dollars annually, fueled by a vast criminal network that spans more than 40 countries and all 50 U.S. states. The report elaborates on the sophisticated operations of these cartels, which include global supply chains from precursor chemicals to production facilities and a complex network of conspirators. These conspirators encompass international shippers, cross-border transporters, corrupt officials, tunnel builders, shell companies, and money launderers, all coordinated to maintain the flow of drugs and launder the proceeds. Moreover, Zhejiang has significantly ramped up its activities within the United States by recruiting members of violent American gangs such as the Bloods, Crips, and Aryan Brotherhood. This collaboration extends across the U.S.-Mexico border, enhancing their operational capabilities and expanding their distribution networks. This strategy allows the Zhejiang to conduct operations with reduced risk, as U.S. gang members can move across borders with less suspicion and have in-depth knowledge of local areas where they operate. The collaboration between Zhejiang cartel and American gangs isn't limited to drug trafficking. It also involves various criminal activities, including money laundering, extortion, and violent enforcement measures. The partnerships are mutually beneficial. The cartel gains a reliable distribution network, while the gangs receive drugs at a lower cost and a share of the profits. And as if drug trafficking wasn't enough to generate billions of dollars, the Zhejiang has diversified its tactics for infiltration and expansion within the U.S. market. In one elaborate scam, Zhejiang operatives disguised themselves as U.S. officials to conduct a $40 million timeshare scam. These cartel members, acting as sales agents, approached timeshare owners with attractive offers to buy back their properties for high sums. However, they tricked owners into paying upfront fees for various supposed services, ranging from advertisement placements to settling fictitious government penalties. Not afraid of anyone, CJNG's members impersonated employees from America's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, an agency that deals with illegal funds and money laundering. They falsely assured people they could access funds that were allegedly frozen by the U.S., demanding fees to release them. To exert control over this network, which often preyed on elderly U.S. citizens and risked their life savings, CJNG employed severe violence and intimidation. Moreover, any call center employees who attempted to resign from these operations were killed. The CJNG's operations are broad, ranging from drug trafficking to more diversified criminal ventures, including extortion, money laundering, and even human trafficking. To be able to maintain that successfully, the cartel knows that it needs to have a strong hold over government officials. In fact, you'll be surprised to learn the extent of CJNG's infiltration into government authorities. In 2022, the Mexican government had to dissolve a special anti-narcotics unit trained by U.S. authorities because it had been infiltrated by cartel members. This elite unit, known as the Sensitive Investigative Unit, SIU, was created in 1997 and played a crucial role in high-profile cases, including the capture of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Despite its significance, the unit was shut down due to severe internal corruption, as its members were found to be collaborating with the very criminals they were supposed to fight against. Further illustrating the cartel's reach, the U.S. government imposed sanctions in 2022 on 6 individuals in Mexico, including Severo Flores Mendoza, a local police coordinator in Jalisco. Mendoza was accused of providing sensitive law enforcement information to the CJN in exchange for bribes. Following the sanctions, he was dismissed from his position to eliminate any doubts about his integrity, but Mayor Juan Valentin Serrano said that Mendoza was doing a good job. This is just one example of how much CJN has infiltrated the government authorities in their quest to operate with impunity. Over the years, CJN has woven a complex web of influence, fear, and corruption throughout Jalisco's municipal police. According to a former official who wished to remain anonymous, more than half of the police force in Jalisco is on the cartel's payroll. The payments to these officers range from 1,000 to 50,000 pesos per month, $53 to $2,635, which is particularly tempting given that in some areas, Mexican police earn as little as $500 to $700 a month. This significant financial incentive makes it difficult for many officers to reject the cartel's offers. The CJNG doesn't just rely on bribery to maintain control, they also use brutal force against any police who might switch allegiance or betray them, particularly under pressure from rival factions like the Sinaloa cartel. This violent enforcement was starkly demonstrated when CJNG members ambushed a state police convoy in Michoacan in 2015, resulting in the death of 15 police officers. In 2022, a shocking revelation came to light in Guanajuato, Mexico, where an investigation exposed that over 150 police officers were secretly on the payroll of the CJN. This extensive corruption not only compromised law enforcement efforts, but also exacerbated the violent gang wars in the region, particularly in Celaya, a city that has seen much of this violence. These officers, deeply embedded with the cartels, engaged in activities such as leaking information, aiding cartel escapes, and even directly protecting cartel members. The issue of corruption extends beyond local police. High-ranking officials have also been implicated in similar corrupt dealings. Recently, the United States imposed sanctions on several high-ranking Mexican officials, including a judge and a former state governor, accusing them of accepting bribes from drug cartels, which has enabled these criminal groups to operate with near impunity. However, one of the most notable cases of corruption involved Genaro Garcia Luna, the former head of Mexico's FBI. Garcia Luna was implicated in significant corrupt activities during the 2018 trial of notorious drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Testimony during the trial alleged that Garcia Luna accepted millions of dollars in bribes from the Sinaloa cartel, including 2 instances where he was reportedly given suitcases containing $3 million in cash. He was eventually arrested in Dallas in December 2019 on charges of accepting millions in bribes. On February 21, 2023, Garcia Luna was declared guilty of all 5 counts by a federal jury in Brooklyn, New York, making him, the once highest-ranking law enforcement official in Mexico, face a possible sentence ranging from 20 years to life in prison. With the CJNG cartel conducting their operations largely without any resistance from the Mexican government, it raises critical questions about the DEA's involvement in this pressing matter. Given the staggering fact that over 108,000 people in the U.S. died from drug overdoses in 2021 alone, a crisis significantly fueled by fentanyl, predominantly trafficked by the CJN, what actions is the DEA taking to address this dire situation? The DEA's ongoing uphill battle. The recent DEA annual report has given a clear warning to the CJN cartel. DEA's top operational priority is to relentlessly pursue and defeat the 2 Mexican drug cartels, the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco cartel, that are primarily responsible for driving the current fentanyl poisoning epidemic in the United States. The report also raises concerns about the effectiveness of the Mexican Navy in managing customs and surveillance at the country's major ports, indicating that criminal organizations corporations have the real control over these critical gateways. The report also highlights widespread corruption among judges and officials throughout the Mexican government. This stance by the DEA and the U.S. government toward Mexico's efforts against cartels like the CJN intensified after an incident on March 3, 2023, when 4 Americans were kidnapped shortly after entering Matamoros from Brownsville, Texas. Traveling in a white minivan, they were attacked and abducted by armed men, resulting in 2 deaths and 2 survivors, who were later rescued by a heavily armed Mexican military convoy. In response to the ongoing cartel violence and its impact on both sides of the border, Texas Representative Dan Crenshaw proposed legislation to classify Mexican drug cartels like the CJN as foreign terrorist groups. He stated, "The cartels are at war with us, poisoning more than 80,000 Americans with fentanyl every year, creating a crisis at our border and turning Mexico into a failed narco state. It's time we directly target them. My legislation will put us at war with the cartels by authorizing the use of military force against them. We cannot allow heavily armed and deadly cartels to destabilize Mexico and import people and drugs into the United States." This legislative move highlights a growing frustration and calls for more aggressive, direct action against the cartels, underlining that the DEA and the U.S. government are seeking proactive measures rather than relying solely on Mexican efforts to address the issue. However, it's worth noting that the DEA and American authorities have been working together to eradicate the CJN cartel's network in the U.S. for quite some time. In 2020, the Justice Department and the DEA revealed the details of their operation, aptly named Project Python, a strategic and intense crackdown designed to mirror the relentless grip of a python as it constricts its prey. Over 6 months, this meticulously planned operation targeted the extensive network of the CJN cartel across the United States. The climax of this dramatic operation unfolded over a single week of synchronized raids across the nation, resulting in the arrests of over 600 CJNG operatives. Furthermore, the operation led to 350 indictments and the substantial seizure of narcotics and laundered cash. To this date, it remains the single largest strike by U.S. authorities against CJN. That being said, U.S. and Mexican law enforcement authorities have teamed up against powerful drug cartels like the CJN. For instance, in June 2015, Ruben Oseguera Gonzalez, known as El Menchito, and the son of CJN leader Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho, was arrested by the Mexican military. For several years, U.S. authorities sought his extradition to face drug trafficking charges. He was eventually extradited to the United States in February 2020. El Menchito, considered the cartel's second-in-command, faced charges related to drug conspiracy and possession of firearms during drug trafficking activities. Despite negotiations, he rejected a plea deal and went to trial in the U.S. In a 2020 operation, Mexican law enforcement authorities targeted one of the cartel's rising stars, the 21-year-old Maria Guadalupe Lopez Esquivel, known as La Catrina. Acting on intelligence from the United States, the Mexican police and military stormed a safe house where La Catrina was hiding, heavily guarded by cartel members. The intense raid was captured on body cam footage, showing La Catrina in a dire state, bleeding heavily after being shot in the neck. The raw video captured the tense moments as she struggled to breathe, with an officer urging her to remain calm and wait for a helicopter to airlift her to a hospital. Despite the rapid medical response, La Catrina died in the hospital just an hour after her capture. This high-stakes operation also led to the arrest of several other cartel members. In recent efforts against the CJN cartel, Mexican officials have partnered with U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency DEA to target nearly 2,000 individuals and companies associated with the cartel. This initiative led to the freezing of over $1.1 billion in assets connected to the CJNG. The operation was spearheaded by Mexico's anti-money laundering unit within the Ministry of Finance, with significant support from the DEA. This coordinated crackdown, part of broader efforts to dismantle the CJNG's financial networks, also involved the U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control. In March 2023, the DEA announced the results of a huge nationwide operation called Operation Last Mile that focused on catching members and helpers of the Jalisco and Sinaloa drug cartels. This operation ran for a whole year, from May 2022 to May 2023, and involved teamwork with local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. During this time, they carried out 1,436 investigations and managed to arrest 3,337 people. They also found and took away almost 44 million fentanyl pills, more than 6,500 pounds of fentanyl powder, over 91,000 pounds of methamphetamine, 8,497 guns, and cash totaling more than $100 million. The amount of fentanyl they seized was enough to make nearly 193 million doses that could have been deadly, saving many people from possible overdose deaths. This operation was a significant hit against the drug cartels, cutting down their ability to harm communities across the U.S. It goes without saying that the fight against drugs is far from over. Cartels like CJNG still operate without much fear of U.S. or Mexican authorities. In fact, it is the opposite in the case of Mexican police. The violence against police officers in Mexico remains alarmingly high, with hundreds of officers being killed annually. In 2024 alone, 104 police officers have been killed across Mexico, many of whom are victims of cartel violence, including that perpetrated by the CJNG. It is unclear how much longer they will continue terrorizing communities and trafficking drugs across borders. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, check out the suggested content on your screen by clicking one of the cards displayed.